Hi, this is Dr. Ryan Loss over at Connecticut Behavioral Health. Today we're going to be talking about staying connected with students during distance learning. Distance learning is a new format for most everybody here, and so there are certain factors that are going to impact the delivery of overall services for students, both from the special education, regular education, and counseling-based perspectives. So today we'll cover a lot of these different factors, getting into certain details that are going to assist staff, students, and parents as well in addressing the connectivity needs of certain students that present with a variety of different concerns. When we talk about staying connected with our students during distance learning format, we've got to recognize obviously every student has different needs. There's no specific set formula for how school staff should stay connected with students. You've got students that present with a variety of different issues going on in their lives that require specific needs. So each connection that you make with a student will be individualized to that student overall. In addition, because every student is unique, you're going to have some connections that are going to need to be made with parents or caregivers as well. So understanding that this is a multifaceted process, a new one certainly for most school personnel to be engaging in, and reaching out to both students and families to make sure that those connections are maintained and strengthened, more importantly, so that the student and the family feel connected. Oftentimes when we're dealing with students that have a variety of different, we'll call them special needs, those families want to and need to feel connected to the school. They're going to need support. Right now is an overwhelming time, I think, for many parents who are going to be at home with their student, with their children, your students, and these parents are going to be working from home and trying to balance this distance learning based program. So there's going to be some stressors there. So they're going to need supports as well. Your students who are used to sitting in a classroom and getting that direct instruction, they're going to require additional supports as well. And there are a lot of factors that need to be taken into consideration when talking about how to effectively stay in contact and support these students during distance learning. One of the factors certainly is learning related issues, another social emotional behavioral issues, school avoidance issues, school refusal based issues are not, tied to that. You got family issues that need to be taken into consideration, as well as this certain grade level of the student. All five of those will impact the type of contact, the frequency, the amount, the intensity of contact that you're going to have with those families and with those students. So let's start breaking down these factors that are going to impact our connectivity with students during distance learning, things that we need to take into consideration as we reach out to these families and these students to make sure that we stay connected with them. The first one being learning related issues. Each student having a different learning profile is going to impact the type of contact, the amount of contact that school personnel are going to have with this student and the family. So whatever the learning based issues are tied to their IEP 504 plan, that's what I'm talking about in terms of how that's going to impact the amount and type of contact that's going to go on. Certainly those with more significant learning difficulties may struggle that much more, and that might require some increased contact. And obviously the type of learning based issue will impact things. Here, you're going to be doing a distance-based learning format, so the level of direct instruction isn't necessarily going to be there all the time. There'll be a different mode of how these students are taught. You're also going to be connecting with those parents, again, to help them better understand how to deliver education to students with potential learning issues or specific learning issues for that matter. Different types of contact are going to help different families. Some families just need a little bit of additional phone support because they have some background. They understand how their child works and how they learn, so that phone contact is just more of a supportive nature and it's going to help them out overall. Then there's the online component. Certainly that can come through connecting with teachers through just online chatting to get some questions answered. The other component that might exist there also is online videos that this teacher may post that teaches the students how to learn a certain bit of information. And then there's video based connectivity. Is the teacher able to video connect and demonstrate something as well? All different types of contact that may be significant to helping a student through some challenging times, and helping the family as well. So we're always going to talk about the family as part of this network, given that this distance learning for the student is going to be done typically through the home-based environment. So we always, when we talk about student-based connectivity, we're still including family-based connectivity in there. We talk about frequency of contact as well. That's going to vary based on the intensity of need. Those students requiring more intense intervention should have more frequent contact. There may be students who need a primer at the beginning of the day to help them with the tasks that are coming ahead, and then a check-in towards the end of the day to make sure that they felt supported. Some may require 3 checks during the day, a beginning, a middle, and an end. Every student's going to be different. You know your students best, and you're going to be able to gauge what the specific need is for each student along those lines. The next factor that we're going to talk about are the social emotional behavioral difficulties that students present with. And with this, again, we're talking about 3 different potential problems, some that may overlap with each other, some that may interact as well with each other. So a huge amount of issues to focus on here. So do note that what I'm going to be talking about is probably a whole lot more abbreviated than it could otherwise be. Certainly a big thing that we talk about here is connections with the parents. Want to maintain that connection because those parents, and I know this term is used a lot, they're going to be on the front lines with their children at home who have those social emotional behavioral issues. So certainly connecting with them is important. Students that present with social emotional behavioral issues, we want to make sure that we're connecting with them as well. Depending on the specific issue that's going on, maintaining that connectivity with school, with those school-based personnel, certainly can go a long way with keeping those students engaged in the academic environment, but also it's the relationship maintenance that's important as well. So certainly what the connections are going to be individualized based on the presenting issue, and certainly that will be an impact to the frequency and intensity of the service as well. For students that have certain social difficulties, what we're also looking at here is how to encourage them and their families to find ways to stay connected and stay in contact with other peers. So using a distance learning format, some systems have ways in which students can connect online and have like group-based talks about different academics that are going on, and that they can also utilize those formats to get just on a social level, just connected with each other. So those are pieces to encourage with them. Other ways that parents can work to encourage contact with their peers, and teachers and social workers, counseling staff can work to encourage that contact as well, is just through other types of devices or social media based connectivity. Sometimes games, not that I want to promote a lot of social media use or video game based use, but oftentimes nowadays you're finding that a lot of individuals are connecting with their peers through gameplay. It's something that's out there. It's a way that right now, given the social distancing pieces that we have going on here, it's going to be one of the ways mainly that peers are going to look to stay connected overall. So working with students to try and find ways to keep them connected with their peers. If there can be some video-based in vivo live student discussions, student meetings, that would be great. And certainly looking at other ways in which students can connect with each other. Some of the games are pretty innocent games and maybe educational in nature that they can connect with as well. So it doesn't always have to be just those old not old, but the more typical games that students play that maybe more mission focused, more violent in nature. I'm not talking about those, but there could be different games that students can engage in where they are connecting with each other and they are talking with each other as well. So working with parents to encourage that, and certainly as you connect with your students, connecting them with different avenues for social contact, definitely an important piece. The students with emotional concerns, the maintenance of certainly counseling-based services through the school. Each school is going to be different in how they work that out. Video-based connectivity, phone-based connectivity. We want to certainly maintain the connectivity for these individuals. Focusing on those emotional management strategies, emotional planning, so that those students can stay up on what strategies they either have learned or can learn to help deal with this different type of learning environment, as well as any stressors that are going to present themselves now because they're not connected with their peers to the same degree. And they're also not receiving the same educational supports that they used to as well. So that's a huge piece too. Working with students with emotional concerns is helping them stay connected with you and the supports that they've received before, helping them manage their emotions, teaching them ideally those cognitive behavioral strategies, that can certainly coach them through some challenging times, and setting up plans for those more challenging situations that they may often have difficulty with. The last item here is those behaviorally challenging students. Staff are going to run into a lot of concerns there where students are just non-compliant. They don't want to get online. They don't want to engage distance learning, and obviously presenting major issues. So connecting with parents, family members, guardians, those are going to be some key contacts there. Ideally, there's some relationships that have been built with students, and we want to look to maintain them. Some students may be very resistant to anything. My recommendation would be continue reaching out. Reach out in, we'll call more passive ways instead of active engagement ways of get to work, more passive ways of, listen here, I'm looking to just reach out. Hope you're doing well. I know this is a new environment. I'm here to support you. And hopefully we can find ways to get connected and get some things done. I'm just going to be here. You may start by trying to connect with them in a more play-based, non-academic format to just start to engage those students. Different ways are going to work for different kids. So do understand that because we're not working directly one-on-one with them, you're going to get some resistance here, with some students. We want to try and create some behavioral structure to also motivate these students that have challenges, but do engage in the academics, but might have some stamina-based issues. So making sure that these students are taking breaks and that we are rewarding their academic accomplishments with some type of reward that we might work out with their parents at home, or if we have some para support or technician support for those students where that technician can connect with these individuals through the social school distance learning platform, that would be ideal. So you've got your accommodation modifications to try and make work more comfortable for them, breaking things down. Those are all going to be there. Making sure that we put some behavioral rewards in there. They're going to need that motivation. And they're more importantly just going to need that connectivity. We want to stay with these students. The easy thing for them is just to disengage. And the challenging thing for their parents and you will be to re-engage them. So any level of contact that you can have with these students, that is key overall. If you're able to connect with these students, certainly working with them on problem-solving strategies, that will be key to help them academically, as well as managing being at home that much more, because there may be more demands placed on them at home, given that they're home, more often than they are otherwise used to being. So part of that contact, making sure we're getting those counseling-based supports in on the behavioral end, on the emotional end, and on the social end of things overall. So the next factor that we're going to talk about are those school academic and school avoidance-based concerns, and those students that display those levels of concern. Certainly, we're looking at a spectrum of academic-based avoidance. Obviously, you have on one far end those students who don't attend school at all, and on the other end, we're talking about those students who do attend but don't necessarily engage every single academic subject. So on the older ages, they may be cutting classes. On the younger ages, they may just straight up refuse to do certain work that's presented. So obviously, one of the things we want to first do for those students who have gone to school but refuse certain types of work is identify those specific academic areas that they do struggle with and choose to avoid. And then connecting with the parent to set up some times with them to coach that student in that particularly difficult area. Now, certainly if the student is using the parent as a support, we want to obviously extend our levels of support to that student as well, and finding ways through our distance learning platform to be able to provide that student with directive academic supports that will help support that student, help that student continue to feel connected to you overall, and can provide more hands-on type of support for the student in that specific academic area. We don't want to have one academic area cloud all the other academic areas. In terms of what I mean by that is that we don't want to have that student's challenges in math make that student not want to do any work at all. So by indicating that we're going to have some directive supports, again, whether that be through um, a video or a posted lesson or something else along those lines, just to give that student that better level of support, that's what we want to work out overall for that student. So connect with the student, connect with the parent, set up some times to try and get some coaching done for that student so that particular area of difficulty for that student, is supported overall. Additionally, we want to utilize this time to provide that student who might be either avoiding school because they are way far behind in work, or the student that goes to school but chooses not to do work, and this is always the complicated situation, who's behind in work and starts to avoid more and more work because they're anxious about the work. This is that time to work with the student to get them caught up on any academics that might be creating anxiety for that student. So it can work on both ends of that spectrum, the student that avoids certain work, but also the student that avoids school due to some level of anxiety about being so far behind. So we want to work to set up a concrete schedule, and we can present something visually to that student to help them see, this is how we're going to help you get caught up. This is the support we're going to provide you. This is how we're going to help you through this tougher time, to try and re-engage them in school overall, because that's what we want to do. We want to keep them engaged, if not re-engage them in the academic learning process overall. So that's an important component there. Now, for those school avoidance students, distance learning can be a double-edged sword. The double-edged sword piece of it is that one student might get work done because they're not going to school, but it might also create the issue of, I don't need to go to school because I can get work done outside of school and in this other distance learning type format. Now, granted, that may be true from the psychological end of things, not the best route to go, because the student that stays home and avoids school for any number of different functions is only reinforcing what that function is. And we want to make sure that we're addressing the function. Again, this is all part of more of a school avoidant type of presentation, but we want to make sure we're addressing that function so that we can better support that student. So again, it becomes a double-edged sword. And at this point in time, it's unavoidable because that's where we're at with how we're educating students. But, again, distance learning can be a double-edged sword. If we're getting the student to do some work, that's great. Ideally, it becomes the piece where through distance learning, they're feeling, one, that they can succeed in school. Maybe there are some other social issues that die down that might also be impacting their ability to attend, as well as some other issues that may work themselves out over the next 2 to 3 months that might help that student feel more comfortable. But here, certainly I think it's important to be aware that it could create a potential problem on the back end of this distance learning format. Just something to be aware of. Right now, again, the goal here is to create a comfortable academic environment for the student, keeping connected with that student, so that they feel like, all right, school's not totally distant for me. I'm still connected here. And that that student that may be avoiding school because they don't feel a connection, here's that time to create a stronger connection or start to build a connection with the student, as we talked about previously, finding passive ways, to just engage the student in general conversation, to show that student that somebody's here to stay connected with you. And it's not all academics. It's about that student and how we can support that student overall. So helping the parents additionally, and this kind of comes back to some of that behavioral coaching as well, because there is that behavioral component that sometimes does come with school avoidance, is trying to help that parent structure the student's day to where there is something rewarding that comes after academics getting done. That could be total academics getting done. That could be partial academics getting done. But what this helps to do potentially is lay some of that groundwork. So if that student maintains their their school avoidance, when school does get back in session overall, ideally the parent is now skilled, or it has a little bit more of a skill set in setting clear limits, letting that student know all these other things that you're getting access to that are rewarding for you are not going to be available unless you get that academic work done overall. So again, here we're looking at just trying to create some connections with the parents, really connect with that student to help support them in different academic areas, as well as emotional areas as well, to just keep them engaged in school, to try and break down some of those barriers that might be existing for the student overall. The next factor that we want to address are family difficulties. Because these students are going to be spending increasing amounts of time at home, they're more exposed to those family dynamics that may be quite problematic for them. They're generally used to coming to school and getting away from some of those dynamics. Now they're going to be at home dealing with a lot of those dynamics. So we want to be sensitive to that and understand the impact that those family home dynamics may be having on their ability to engage academically. So that's an important piece that we want to be sensitive to. Sometimes you'll know about them, sometimes you won't, but it's important to keep those things in the back of your mind, that if you find that there's some new issues that come up for students, if there are students that just aren't engaging in the same way, there may be some family dynamic based issues that are going on. And we want to find some ways to continue to stay connected and support those students. If certainly we know ahead of time what's going on, but if we come to find that maybe that student is struggling because they're at home a little bit more, we want to be able to maintain those connections with them and support those students through this time. You want to work with the student on finding productive activities to engage in. That might assist them in managing that negative impact. And again, just the overall connectivity, making sure that we're finding those times to connect with those students that we know come from different challenging environments. The other piece to be sensitive to are the interests that that family has in academics. There may be some homes where parents don't really engage in academics, or maybe are not as interested in wanting to support the academics that are coming home. There's also the piece where parents may have really intensive jobs. So that is all part of a family dynamic issue. It's not just bad parents, it's understanding the whole family dynamic. So in some homes, when you have an intense job, for one parent and that parent's working from home, they may not be able to be there and present as much to support that student. And so that student may lag a bit in being able to get certain amounts of work done. And again, I don't expect you all to know exactly what goes on in each home. It's just a matter of understanding that there are a lot of variables that are going to impact these students. And by keeping in contact with them and staying connected with them, sometimes we'll get a little bit more of a light into what's going on the home front overall. So again, just something that we want to continue to focus on and work to be aware of when working with students, those family difficulties, family dynamics that are going on overall. Certainly the slide talks more about those family difficulties, but there's other family dynamics. And again, that can be classified as a family difficulty, not in its most negative sense if a parent is really intense with the job that they have and it really makes it hard for them to pull away during what would otherwise be a school day. But it's a family dynamic issue that's going to impact how that student overall engages in distance learning. So just something to be aware of. Again, and I come back to this a lot, and you're probably sick of me saying it at this point, but maintaining connections, finding ways to connect with your students, especially the ones that you at least have some background on, that are a little bit more vulnerable or a lot more vulnerable, to different issues that go on, and that of family-based issues that exist at home. Certainly maintaining those connections, providing that level of support for those students can go a long way. So the last factor that we're going to break down is grade level. And this is a pretty obvious one in terms of what levels of support are going to differ amongst grade levels. Certainly with those early age students, those early grade students, those ones at lower grades, the amount of involvement, from teachers certainly may be more intensive, especially if you're working with students that have additional challenges. And that's going to exist for parents as well. So that's where you're looking at probably a more intensive environment for teachers and parents to engage students in. Having a kindergartner, first grader, second grader, third grader, those students are less independent sometimes, and certainly their education may not have advanced enough to be able to always understand some of the directions that are given. So to have a parent present and able to support and engage them at home is going to be key. certainly at the higher grades, middle school, high school. Not to say that that's any bit easier, because there are concepts that students may still have some difficulty in understanding. It's just they may be a little bit more of an independent initiator, and require a little less support in certain areas. Doesn't mean it's going to be drastically different. It's just being sensitive to different grade levels, are naturally going to come with different levels of support. However, on an individualized basis, there may be greater supports that are needed per student. So you might have a high schooler that has more intensive supports than a elementary age student, just because of the different needs that exist for that individual student. But grade level, definitely another factor to take into account when conducting distance learning overall. I'm going to move quickly into kind of the wrapping it up segment. I've been breaking each factor down into its individually separate video, but I think it's important at this point to talk about breaking things down and pulling it all together here with all of these different factors. So what we're looking at with distance learning is this new environment for everybody involved: students, teachers, parents, support staff, unexpected change in how education is being delivered here. And those students, specifically those with the social, emotional, behavioral, academic challenges, they're going to really be impacted by this overall. The levels of support that are going to be needed for those students is likely to increase. It's a drastic change, in learning. And if they presented with difficulties learning in the standard academic environment where they had some individual supports provided to them, now you're without those daily supports side by side. We got to find ways to create those, or at least to try to make them work in this home-based environment, in this different environment overall. So there's going to be some changes, drastic changes for some, where we're going to continue to need to maintain those connections or build stronger connections so that we can get productivity from these students overall. So as much as some might like this working from home or homeschooling, it can come with some additional stressors. Those family dynamic-based issues can negatively impact the student's achievement. We want to be sensitive to those. And we're individualizing education here. As not to say that you don't already do that for a lot of your students, but really looking at those individual needs, because they may become that much more prominent when you have that much more distance between you and your students. Where we're looking at now, we're really seeing the impact of other factors that the student escapes from, or that the student is supported with in school. So without those other supports, now we're seeing the student, kind of barren, without these supports in that 6.5-hour school day that they were otherwise provided with. So again, something to be very sensitive to. We need to individualize our supports, the content of those supports, the frequency of those supports, the intensity of those supports to meet that need. I am sensitive to the fact that this is new for you all, and there's additional stressors that come on your end. So certainly be sensitive to that. Take care of yourselves. It's a lot going on in the world right now. And if you're not taking care of yourself, you're not going to be as effective a teacher. Make sure to get outside, make sure to get some fresh air, pull yourself away from the electronics, give yourself a schedule, just as you'd encourage your students to get a schedule set for themselves, so that you feel as though you have good control, or as much control at least, over what's going on, at this point in time, because that can all certainly be very challenging. So thank you for your time. If you have questions, reach out.